The quantum resonance array hummed with an almost imperceptible vibration, a silent guardian at the edge of humanity's solar system. Most would have seen nothing. A series of seemingly random satellite clusters, ancient communication relays, and what appeared to be space debris. To the Carillion Confederation, it looked like the primitive early-stage technological detritus of an unimportant species. They were catastrophically wrong. Commander Zarak adjusted the bioneural interface of his command ship, the Sword of Absolute Progression. His compound eyes, each a kaleidoscope of fractal lenses that could process multiple spectrums of information simultaneously, scanned the incoming data streams. Centuries of galactic conquest had made the Carillions masters of subjugation, their civilization built on the methodical assimilation of emerging species. Earth was supposed to be another routine acquisition. The ship's synanthropological database scrolled with humanity's recorded history. Wars, environmental challenges, technological leaps, all meticulously categorized and analyzed. The Carillions had reduced human complexity to a series of predictable algorithmic patterns: primitive nuclear technology, fractured global governance, limited space exploration, perfect candidates for controlled integration. What the database didn't capture was something no computational model could truly understand: human unpredictability. In a small apartment in Buenos Aires, Maya Rodriguez adjusted her custom-built quantum decryption rig. At 17, she was already a legend in underground hacking circles, a prodigy who saw computer systems as living, breathing entities to be understood, not just accessed. Her mother's work at the Global Defense Initiative had given her insights that went far beyond typical cybersecurity. The first Carillion communication probe pinged Earth's outer sensor networks. Most systems would have triggered standard diplomatic protocols, perhaps a confused response, maybe a panicked military alert. Instead, Maya's custom algorithms had been waiting, dormant, for precisely this moment. "Hello," she muttered, fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. "Let's play." Aboard the Sword of Absolute Progression, Commander Zarak didn't notice the first anomaly. A microscopic data packet, seemingly innocuous, had already begun its infiltration. It wasn't an attack. Not yet. It was a probe, a digital tentative touch that would map every vulnerability in the Carillion communication systems. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched multiple global monitoring screens in the GDI's underground command center. Unlike previous moments of potential global conflict, this felt different. Every nation's defense and scientific networks were synchronized. A global organism preparing its response. "Activate Project Whisper," she commanded, her voice calm, but laden with years of preparation. Across the planet, systems that had appeared dormant began to pulse with quiet energy. Quantum communication nodes embedded in seemingly ordinary infrastructure activated. Satellites that looked like obsolete communication relays transformed their configurations. What the Carillions saw as primitive technology was actually a distributed, living network. The teenage hacker and the seasoned scientist were just two nodes in a much larger system. Humanity wasn't preparing for contact. It was already several steps ahead. Zarak's communication specialists began preparing the standard annexation protocol, a series of transmissions that had successfully intimidated or subdued 213 previous civilizations. Mathematical representations of their technological superiority. Holographic demonstrations of resistance futility. Precise statistical models showing the economic and technological advantages of submission. They were about to make first contact with a species that would redefine everything they understood about first contact. Maya Rodriguez smiled. The first trap was already set. Not a weapon of destruction, but something far more interesting. As the Carillion transmission began, she initiated a global response that would become legendary, a synchronized global concert that was simultaneously a musical performance, a mathematical encryption, and the first warning that humanity was nothing like the Carillions expected. The universe was about to learn that humans didn't just adapt. They transformed. The Global Defense Initiative's primary facility wasn't what anyone expected. Located beneath the Atacama Desert, it appeared on satellite imaging as nothing more than a series of research outposts and geological survey stations. The real marvel existed kilometers underground, a complex that made the most advanced military installations look like children's science projects. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a holographic display that pulsed with living data. Project Prometheus was more than a weapon system. It was humanity's ultimate insurance policy, decades in the making. What began as scattered research programs, initially funded by competing national interests, had gradually transformed into a unified global defense strategy. Major Jack Chen reviewed the adaptive combat unit specifications with a critical eye. These weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. Each unit was a living, breathing computational matrix, a hybrid of biological optimization and quantum computing that pushed the boundaries of what humanity considered possible. Biomechanical resonance at 97.3%, he muttered, reviewing the latest diagnostic reports. Neural network synchronization complete. The first prototype stood in the adjacent chamber, a figure that looked human but was something entirely different. Nano-adaptive muscular structures that could reconfigure themselves instantaneously. A nervous system that was part organic, part quantum computational matrix. Eyes that could process electromagnetic spectrums far beyond human or alien perception. Dr. Aisha O'Keefe, the lead biomechanical engineer, approached with a datapad. The last psychological integration test is complete. These units don't just follow orders. They understand context, adapt to changing scenarios, and make decisions that go beyond traditional tactical programming. What the Xyrillians didn't know was that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technological. It was the ability to turn limitation into opportunity. In a secure communication hub, Maya Rodriguez continued her digital infiltration of the alien communication networks. What looked like random data probes were actually sophisticated mapping algorithms designed to understand the Xyrillian communication infrastructure at its most fundamental level. Her mother watched, a mix of pride and concern etching her features. Elena understood something the aliens had completely missed. Humanity's most powerful attribute was its capacity for collective problem-solving. Global resources that had once been dedicated to competition were now fully synchronized. Climate research teams provided insights into adaptive system dynamics. Quantum physicists collaborated with neuroscientists. Artists worked alongside military strategists to develop new forms of psychological warfare. The adaptive combat units were just the tip of the iceberg. Project Prometheus had several key components: biological enhancement, nano-adaptive physiological modifications that could help humans survive in extreme environments, quantum communication networks, a distributed intelligence system that could process and respond to threats faster than any centralized command structure, psychological warfare algorithms, communication strategies designed to destabilize alien cognitive processes, adaptive technology integration, systems that could learn and transform in real time. Major Chen selected a prototype unit for final testing. As the biomechanical enhancement systems came online, the unit's entire physiological structure began to shift. Muscle density increased, neurological pathways reconfigured. The line between human and technology blurred completely. "We're not creating super soldiers," Dr. O'Keefe explained to a group of international observers. "We're creating adaptive intelligence nodes. Each unit is part of a larger, global defensive network." The international team watching the demonstration represented a cross-section of humanity's best minds. Climate scientists sat beside quantum physicists. Linguists worked with military strategists. Artists collaborated with computational experts. Maya's voice cut through the technical discussions. "They're coming," she said simply, her fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces, "and they have no idea what's waiting for them." Dr. Elena Rodriguez looked at her daughter, then at the adaptive combat units, then at the global communication networks that pulsed with quiet energy. Humanity wasn't just preparing for a potential invasion. They were reimagining the very concept of defense. The Exarillion Confederation believed they were approaching a primitive species ready for subjugation. They were about to discover that humanity was a living, breathing, evolving system, one that viewed potential extinction as just another problem to be solved. The Exarillion attack fleet arrived with mathematical precision, a fractal formation of 10,000 ships that had systematically conquered civilizations across 3 galactic quadrants. Their weapon systems could shatter planetary crusts. Their shields could deflect entire nuclear arsenals. Each ship was a technological marvel, centuries ahead of what any emerging species could comprehend. Commander Zarak watched the approach with clinical detachment. Holographic displays tracked Earth's primitive defense systems, scattered satellites, a handful of rudimentary space stations, ground-based missile platforms that looked like relics from a bygone technological era. What he didn't see were the systems humanity had been quietly developing for decades. Pilot Aisha Okik sat in the Global Defense Initiative's primary control center, her neural interface humming with quantum-entangled communication networks. Around her, a team of specialists from every conceivable scientific discipline worked in perfect synchronization. Meteorologists sat beside quantum physicists. Linguists collaborated with cybersecurity experts. Artists worked alongside military strategists. "Incoming wave," she muttered, her consciousness already spreading across the autonomous drone swarm. The first wave of the Exarillion assault wasn't what anyone expected. Massive energy signatures began charging across their forward weapon arrays. Standard invasion protocols suggested an immediate planetary bombardment, the kind of overwhelming force that had crushed countless civilizations before. But something was different this time. Maya Rodriguez's infiltration algorithms were already dancing through the Exarillion communication networks. What looked like random data packets were actually sophisticated mapping protocols, quantum-encrypted probes that were systematically dismantling the aliens' computational infrastructure from the inside. "Target acquired," Maya whispered, her fingers a blur across holographic interfaces. The first attack came not as a physical assault, but as a communication virus so complex it defied traditional understanding. Exarillion ship systems began displaying increasingly bizarre outputs. Navigation screens flickered with human cultural media. Rap videos interspersed with complex mathematical proofs. Communication channels erupted with linguistic puzzles that forced alien computational systems into recursive logic loops. Commander Zarek's first indication that something was wrong came when his ship's primary navigation system began displaying a documentary about human resilience, a seemingly random collection of historical moments that somehow disrupted the ship's computational logic. "Impossible," he muttered, watching as his most advanced targeting systems began to malfunction. Aisha's drone swarm wasn't a traditional military formation. Each drone was a living, thinking node in a global defensive network. They moved with a fluidity that defied traditional combat algorithms, adapting, learning, transforming with each millisecond of engagement. The Exarillion fleet found itself fighting an enemy that didn't follow any known rules of warfare. Quantum-encrypted communication channels allowed humanity to coordinate with a speed and precision that made their military look like a single, massively parallel intelligence. Every drone, every defensive system was simultaneously an individual unit and part of a larger, living organism. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched multiple global monitoring screens. This wasn't just a defensive action. It was a species-level response to an existential threat. "Activate Project Whisper," she commanded. Across the planet, systems that had appeared dormant began to pulse with quiet energy. Satellites that looked like obsolete communication relays transformed their configurations. What the Exarillions saw as primitive technology was actually a distributed, living network. The first physical engagement was almost anticlimactic. Exarillion weapon systems that could typically obliterate entire planetary defenses found themselves confronting adaptive shield technologies that didn't just block attacks. They studied them, learned from them, and developed counter-strategies in microseconds. Commander Zarak watched in growing horror as his most advanced weapon systems were systematically neutralized by an enemy that seemed to be learning and evolving faster than any computational model could predict. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was conducting a live-fire experiment in evolutionary warfare. The universe was about to learn that humans didn't just adapt to challenges. They transformed them. The true marvel of human technological innovation stood in the underground testing facility of the Global Defense Initiative. Major Jack Chen watched as the latest adaptive combat unit underwent its final calibration, a living testament to humanity's capacity for radical transformation. This wasn't a soldier in any traditional sense. Dr. Aisha O'Keefe made final adjustments to the unit's quantum neural interface. Each centimeter of its body was a computational matrix that redefined the boundaries between biological and technological systems. Nano-adaptive armor didn't just protect. It learned, analyzed, and transformed with each potential threat. "Cerulean plasma weapon simulation," she commanded. The combat unit's molecular structure began to shift before the first energy pulse could be fully generated. Microscopic adaptive layers reconfigured themselves, creating a crystalline structure that not only absorbed the incoming energy, but began to convert it into a potential counterattack mechanism. Major Chen raised an eyebrow. Energy conversion efficiency, 98.7%. Dr. O'Keefe responded, her voice a mix of scientific precision and barely contained excitement. And that's just the baseline response. Maya Rodriguez watched from a secondary monitoring station, her fingers dancing across quantum-encrypted communication interfaces. The combat units were more than weapons. They were a distributed intelligence network that could adapt faster than any traditional computational system could predict. Each unit contained a multi-layered learning algorithm that drew from global data sources, military strategies, psychological research, environmental adaptation studies, all integrated into a single evolving combat system. Where traditional military units followed rigid protocols, these units could make contextual decisions that went beyond simple combat programming. In the adjacent research wing, climate scientists worked alongside quantum physicists and linguistic experts. The Global Defense Initiative had long ago abandoned the concept of specialized departments. Every challenge was an opportunity for integrated problem-solving. Dr. Elena Rodriguez reviewed the latest combat unit performance metrics. The Exarillion invasion had become something far more interesting than a potential threat. It was a catalyst for humanity's most radical technological leap. "Activate full-spectrum adaptive response," she commanded. The combat units weren't just prepared for physical warfare. Their neural networks could process multiple dimensions of conflict simultaneously: psychological warfare, computational disruption, environmental adaptation. Each unit was a living, thinking system that could transform the very nature of conflict. Major Chen selected a prototype unit for advanced testing. As the biomechanical enhancement systems came online, the unit's entire physiological structure began to shift. Muscle density increased, neurological pathways reconfigured, sensory capabilities expanded beyond human, or alien, limitations. "We're not creating super soldiers," Dr. O'Keefe explained to the International Observation Team. "We're creating adaptive intelligence nodes. Each unit is part of a larger, global defensive network." The observation team represented a cross-section of global expertise. A climate researcher from Bangladesh sat beside a quantum computing expert from Canada. An African linguist discussed communication strategies with a South American cybersecurity specialist. The room hummed with a collaborative energy that transcended traditional national boundaries. Maya's voice cut through the technical discussions. "Cerulean computational patterns detected," she announced, her fingers moving with surgical precision across multiple holographic interfaces, initiating adaptive response protocol. The combat unit's response was instantaneous and breathtaking. Its molecular structure began to generate a computational field that could actively disrupt alien communication networks. Not through brute force attack, but through a sophisticated linguistic and mathematical deconstruction that rendered alien communication systems temporarily inert. Adaptation complete, the unit reported, its voice a perfect blend of human inflection and computational precision. Dr. Elena Rodriguez looked at the combat unit, this living embodiment of humanity's collective potential. The Exarillion Confederation believed they were approaching a primitive species ready for subjugation. They were about to discover that humanity was a living, breathing, evolving system that viewed potential extinction as just another problem to be solved. The universe was about to learn that adaptive warfare was more than a technology. It was a philosophy. It was humanity's ultimate expression of survival. The Exarillion communication networks began to unravel in ways that defied all computational logic. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched as Maya's latest psychological warfare algorithm transformed alien communication into a labyrinth of impossible challenges. It wasn't just about disruption. It was about systematically dismantling the very foundations of alien cognitive processes. In the Global Defense Initiative's Advanced Research Wing, a team of linguists, neuroscientists, artists, and quantum mathematicians had been preparing for this moment for decades. Psychological warfare was no longer about simple propaganda or traditional communication strategies. It was a multidimensional assault on consciousness itself. Maya Rodriguez sat at the epicenter of this cognitive storm, her neural interface allowing her to navigate alien communication networks like a digital archaeologist. Each transmission was a puzzle, each communication channel a potential weapon. The first wave of psychological attacks was deceptively simple. Exarillion communication systems began receiving transmissions that seemed innocuous at first. Mathematical proofs that contained recursive logic loops. Musical compositions that triggered unexpected neural resonances. Visual patterns that challenged the very foundations of alien perception. Commander Zarak watched in growing horror as his ship's communication systems became increasingly unstable. What began as minor disruptions quickly escalated into a full-scale cognitive assault. One transmission contained a series of mathematical puzzles that, when attempted, would cause the alien computational systems to enter recursive loops. Another broadcast integrated complex linguistic patterns that actively rewrote the neural processing algorithms of any system attempting to decode them. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, a quantum linguist, explained the strategy to the International Observation Team. "We're not just disrupting their communication," he said, "we're challenging their entire conceptual framework of intelligence and communication." The psychological warfare went beyond simple digital disruption. Each transmission was a multi-layered assault that attacked multiple levels of alien cognition simultaneously. Linguistic deconstruction. Communication patterns designed to create cognitive dissonance. Mathematical paradoxes. Logic loops that challenged fundamental computational processes. Sensory manipulation. Frequency-based transmissions that induced psychological instability. Cultural shock. Rapid-fire cultural information that overwhelmed alien perception systems. Maya's most ingenious creation was a transmission series that combined elements of human art, mathematics, and cultural expression. Each broadcast was simultaneously a musical composition, a mathematical proof, and a philosophical challenge. "They're trying to understand us," Maya explained to her mother. But understanding requires more than just computational analysis. It requires empathy, creativity, context. The Exarillion fleet found itself confronting an enemy that didn't just fight. It communicated in ways that fundamentally challenged the concept of communication itself. Transmission after transmission chipped away at the alien fleet's cognitive stability. Classical music mixed with quantum mathematical theorems. Abstract art integrated with complex linguistic patterns. Historical documentaries embedded with psychological trigger mechanisms. Commander Zarak's most advanced translation algorithms began producing increasingly bizarre results. A standard military communication might suddenly become a philosophical treatise on the nature of consciousness. A tactical report could transform into a jazz composition that challenged the very concept of linear communication. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't just about winning a conflict. It was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to intelligence and communication. "We're showing them that intelligence is more than computational efficiency," she told the research team. "We're demonstrating that creativity, adaptability, and empathy are fundamental forms of intelligence." The psychological warfare reached its peak when the alien fleet began receiving continuous transmissions that seemed to predict their every move, not through simple computational modeling, but through a holistic understanding of cognitive processes that went beyond traditional predictive algorithms. Maya's final transmission was a masterpiece of cognitive disruption, a communication that was simultaneously a mathematical proof, a musical composition, and a philosophical challenge to the very concept of alien intelligence. The Exarillion Confederation had approached Earth expecting to find a primitive species ready for subjugation. Instead, they found themselves confronting a form of intelligence that defied every computational model they had ever developed. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was redefining the very concept of communication and intelligence. The moment Project Earth's Wrath reached full activation was unlike anything the universe had ever witnessed. It wasn't a weapon system. It wasn't a military strategy. It was a species-level evolutionary response that transformed every human into a potential node of resistance. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the Global Defense Initiative's Central Command, watching as the entire planet became a living, breathing defensive network. Quantum-entangled communication systems pulsed with an energy that defied traditional computational models. Every system, every individual became part of a collective intelligence that was simultaneously unified and infinitely diverse. Maya Rodriguez's fingers danced across quantum-encrypted interfaces, her consciousness spreading across multiple communication networks. She wasn't just monitoring the conflict. She was orchestrating a global symphony of resistance that integrated every possible human capability. The first indication of the full scope came when climate scientists began predicting Exarillion fleet movements with impossible accuracy. Mathematicians developed communication algorithms that could decrypt alien encryption in real time. Artists created psychological warfare techniques that challenged the very concept of alien logic. Major Jack Chen watched as the adaptive combat units transformed. They were no longer simply soldiers or technological systems. They were living nodes in a global, distributed intelligence network that could learn, adapt, and respond faster than any centralized command structure. Computational synchronization at 99.7%. Dr. Aisha Okik reported, her voice a mix of scientific precision and barely contained excitement. Every unit is now part of a living, adaptive system. The Exarillion fleet found itself confronting an enemy that didn't just fight. It evolved in real time. Each human became a potential point of resistance. A climate researcher in Bangladesh could provide critical environmental adaptation data. A quantum physicist in Canada could develop computational disruption strategies. An artist in Brazil could create psychological warfare techniques that defied alien comprehension. Commander Zarak watched in growing horror as his most advanced predictive algorithms became increasingly useless. The human response wasn't just adaptive, it was fundamentally unpredictable. The conflict transformed from a traditional military engagement into a species-level experiment in collective intelligence. Quantum-entangled communication networks allow humanity to coordinate with a speed and precision that made their military look like a single, massively parallel intelligence. Every defensive system, every research facility, every individual was simultaneously an individual unit and part of a larger, living organism. Dr. Rodriguez understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't just about defending against an invasion. It was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to intelligence, conflict, and collective problem-solving. We're not just fighting, she explained. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was rewriting the fundamental rules of galactic engagement. The universe was about to learn that some species don't just survive. They transform everything they touch. The remnants of the Exarillion fleet hung in Earth's orbital space like wounded predators, their once immaculate technological marvels now reduced to scared and broken vessels. Commander Zarak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the sword of absolute progression, experiencing something his species had never known: complete existential recalibration. Dr. Elena Rodriguez led the first contact negotiation team. This wasn't going to be a traditional surrender. It was going to be a radical reimagining of interspecies interaction. "You have two choices," she explained to the surviving Cerulean leadership, her voice calm and precise. "Complete cultural integration or permanent exile from our solar system." Maya Rodriguez, now the lead communication specialist, had already begun developing translation algorithms that went far beyond simple linguistic conversion. These were cognitive bridges, systems designed to help the Ceruleans understand not just human language, but human context, emotion, and collective thinking. The integration process was nothing like anyone expected. Research facilities sprang up across multiple continents, collaborative spaces where human and alien scientists could study the unprecedented nature of the conflict. Each facility was designed as an open ecosystem of knowledge, breaking down the traditional barriers between species, disciplines, and ways of thinking. Dr. Aisha Okik led the first xenobiological research team. The Ceruleans weren't just going to be studied, they were going to be understood. Their biological systems, their computational approaches, their entire way of perceiving reality would be explored with a combination of scientific rigor and profound empathy. Major Jack Chen oversaw the military integration protocols. The adaptive combat units that had been humanity's defense mechanism were now being repurposed. They became living repositories of knowledge, creating neural networks that could help both species understand the deeper mechanics of conflict and cooperation. The Cerulean survivors found themselves confronting a fundamental paradox. They had approached Earth expecting to conquer a primitive species. Instead, they discovered a civilization that viewed every challenge as an opportunity for mutual growth. Some Cerulean specialists chose complete integration. They underwent extensive cognitive recalibration programs that helped them understand humanity's unique approach to intelligence. These programs weren't about suppression or control. They were about genuine mutual understanding. Maya's communication algorithms became legendary. They weren't just translation systems. They were cognitive bridges that helped different species understand each other's fundamental thought processes. Artists worked alongside linguists and quantum physicists to create communication systems that went beyond traditional linguistic boundaries. The global research effort transformed everything it touched. Climate scientists collaborated with alien technological experts to develop planetary restoration techniques. Quantum physicists from multiple species worked together to explore computational approaches that neither civilization had previously imagined. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood the deeper significance. This wasn't just about surviving an invasion. It was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to intelligence, conflict, and collective potential. "We're not just integrating a new species," she explained to international observers. "We're creating a new model of interstellar cooperation." The Cerulean survivors discovered that human integration wasn't about submission. It was about transformation. Their technological systems were systematically reimagined. Their computational approaches were challenged and expanded. Their entire conceptual framework of intelligence was fundamentally reconstructed. Some of the most fascinating developments came from unexpected collaborations. A Cerulean quantum mathematician, working with a human jazz musician, developed new communication algorithms that merged mathematical precision with creative expression. A climate researcher from Bangladesh collaborated with an alien environmental specialist to develop planetary restoration techniques that combine multiple scientific approaches. Commander Zarak, who had once led the invasion, now led a research team exploring the fundamental differences between species. His personal transformation became a symbol of the broader cultural integration. The first interspecies research publication was a masterpiece of collaborative thinking, a document that was simultaneously a scientific paper, an artistic expression, and a philosophical exploration of intelligence and potential. Humanity had done more than defend itself. It had demonstrated a radical new approach to interstellar interaction, one based on mutual understanding, collective growth, and the fundamental belief that diversity is the truest form of strength. The universe was watching, and everything was about to change. The Galactic Council convened in a space station that defied traditional architectural understanding, a living, adaptive structure that seemed to breathe with the collective intelligence of multiple species. Representatives from 217 known civilizations gathered to discuss the most significant event in galactic history, humanity's unprecedented emergence. Maya Rodriguez stood at the center of the council chamber, not as a military leader or a politician, but as a living embodiment of humanity's transformative potential. Her neural interface hummed with quantum-encrypted communication networks that represented decades of collaborative research. "We're not here to conquer," she began, her voice simultaneously translated across multiple linguistic and cognitive spectrums. "We're here to collaborate." Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from a secondary observation deck, understanding that this moment was about far more than a single diplomatic engagement. It was a fundamental reimagining of interstellar interaction. The holographic displays began to show humanity's journey, not as a linear narrative of conquest, but as a complex, adaptive system of collective growth. Climate restoration projects developed during the Exarillion conflict now showed promise for multiple planetary ecosystems. Communication technologies that had emerged from the psychological warfare algorithms were revolutionizing interspecies understanding. Major Jack Chen presented the adaptive combat technology that had been systematically transformed into collaborative research tools. What was once a defensive system was now a platform for mutual understanding and technological exchange. The Galactic Council found itself confronting a species that didn't fit any known evolutionary or technological model. Dr. Aisha O'Keefe's xenobiological research revealed the true depth of human potential. Humanity's adaptive capabilities went beyond technological innovation. They represented a fundamental approach to intelligence that was simultaneously flexible, creative, and profoundly empathetic. Humanity doesn't just solve problems, she explained to the assembled representatives. We transform them into opportunities for collective growth. The most fascinating developments came from unexpected collaborations. A quantum communication network developed during the conflict now allowed instantaneous knowledge exchange across multiple species. Planetary restoration techniques combined insights from human climate scientists, Tyrillian technological experts, and xenobiological researchers from 3 different star systems. Maya's cognitive bridge algorithms became the foundation of a new form of interstellar communication. These weren't just translation systems, they were living, adaptive platforms that could help different species genuinely understand each other's fundamental thought processes. The Exarillion survivors who had chosen integration became ambassadors of this new approach. Commander Zarak, once a conqueror, now led research initiatives that explored the fundamental nature of intelligence and cooperation. The galactic archives were systematically rewritten. Humanity was no longer categorized as an emerging species, it was recognized as a fundamental force of transformation. Technological exchanges revealed humanity's true strength. Where other species saw specialized development, humans demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for interdisciplinary thinking. A musical composition could become a mathematical proof. A climate restoration technique could inspire new approaches to computational design. The first interstellar collaborative research publication became a landmark document. It was simultaneously a scientific paper, an artistic expression, and a philosophical exploration of collective potential. Artists worked alongside quantum physicists. Linguists collaborated with environmental specialists. Each page was a demonstration of humanity's unique approach to knowledge. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood the deeper significance. This wasn't just about humanity's place in the galaxy. It was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to intelligence, cooperation, and collective potential. We're not exceptional because we're stronger or more technologically advanced, she explained to the younger researchers. We're exceptional because we view every challenge as an opportunity for mutual growth. The adaptive technologies developed during the conflict began to show promise far beyond defensive applications. Nano-adaptive systems, originally designed for combat, now showed potential for planetary restoration, medical breakthroughs,